What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the channel. We're talking rebuilding your dynasty roster today. We're going to be going, how do you assess your roster? What does that look like? Going over tools that you can use for that. Planning it. Hey, what do I do? Am I diving into this middle of the season now? My dynasty team just hasn't taken the jump off that I wanted to do. How do you do that? And then two big strategies that I like to implement in my league if I'm in a rebuilding. Am I retooling? Or am I going into and just totally rebuilding that program? We're going to be looking at that, kind of diving into it. So we're going to be talking about Dynasty Rebuild, how to put Malik Neighbors on there, because if you have him on your rebuild, you'd be doing pretty well there. But let's first talk about assessing, right? So what do you look for? So number one, very simple thing that a lot of managers know about, points for, points against, right? Hey, where is your team at? Is your team a true contender or is it a paper warrior, right? I think one thing to also know when you're thinking about rebuilding, you might be right now sitting there and in middle of the pack, or maybe you're third in the league, or even second or first in the league, but your points for, points against shows that your team's not very good. Maybe scheduling wise, maybe just matchups, you've been pretty lucky. You might not think you need to rebuild or maybe retool a little bit, but just noticing that, seeing where your points for, points are against, he's going to go a long way in telling you what you need to do, right? Now, other stuff that you can do out there besides that, Dynasty Daddy has a website. I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like here in a second. But that site allows you to kind of show any platform that you look at, your league standings, positional ranks, positional values, tiers within the league, and then you can look at the available markets out there. So if you know people in your league use Keep Trade Cut, Fantasy Cow, Dynasty Process, Dynasty Superflex, all of those different things, you can kind of go through and tailor it for your league and exploit those values. I think that's what you're looking for when you're thinking of like, all right, it syncs to my league. Where are some guys out there that I think I can go target? Who are some teams out there I can go target? It's an incredible tool and it's free, right? The other one is Keep Trade Cut. They do have a league power rankings tool and it is free. It does league overview, power rankings, team breakdown, available players on waivers with dynasty value. That's actually fun. So one thing to look at is like, hey, who are some players on my waivers that are increasing in value right now that I can add? We're going to be talking about waiver ads and why they are important in dynasty leagues too, because of the flip nature, right? Now, let me show you that Dynasty Daddy account. So what I did here is I popped on one of my teams that I have in one of my leagues. And when you look in here, it'll show you the first teams over there on the left side, depending on where you're watching, of like, all right, breakdown, right? So like, look at Jacob's team there, 6-1, but he's a fraud. That probably means his points for, points against shows that, hey, he's just had some good matchups, right? When you're looking at him, and it breaks down each rank of their players. So it goes overall rank, but it also talks about starter rank. Okay, with the guys in there, how strong are they, right? What is the quarterback rank? Then running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then their draft capital rank. This just gives you a snapshot. I think it's very good just to kind of understand, all right, where is my team at? So if you can go all the way down to mine, I'm 4-3, feeling frisky there. And you can see where kind of my deficiencies are. And this is my roster here to show you kind of my roster. Trevor Lawrence and Kirk Cousins there. It kind of shows you where the value's at. Bucky, Javonte, Jonathan, wide receivers, kind of goes through and says, okay, these are your guys that you got to look at that you like. For me, I'm still in the middle pack. I need to make some moves, but it does show you, gives you that kind of that arsenal. And then what I like to do is I like to go through there and I'll find teams like the fraud teams, right? The real McSpanky, young MCs that are labeled frauds, and maybe they're willing to sell right now. Maybe they look at that too and say, hey, so if I need to identify a team to trade with, I will identify that. And then on the bottom down there, you'll just see kind of how the power rankings go. Who has the most draft capital? Who maybe has some running backs to move or wide receivers to move? Who's building differently than I that I could use this? So this is a very good just snapshot. If you're thinking about rebuilding, a very, very good tool of just saying, okay, if I'm going to rebuild, let me have a capital. Let me target these teams. These are the guys I want to go with. Now, after that, once you have that, I firmly believe in auditing your league. So here's what, one thing I think is when you get into rebuilds, a lot of teams just say, hey, send offers looking for youth or picks. That's I see that all the time in my leagues, right? But you're going to get low ball offers. You're going to get pissed off. Like that's just how it goes because that's just how kind of the league goes. But the best way to do this audit is keep a running spreadsheet. In the description below, I have a generic one anybody can use. Just make a copy of it. You guys go in there and you get to look at league mates' tendencies, right? What are some trades that they've offered or completed, right? Fab bids. Who are they been going after? Draft pick tendencies from the previous years. Anything else you seem valuable, right? So, for example, for team needs, look at this one, knowing where your opponent needs in negotiations. Okay, so going on Dynasty Daddy, going over it. Okay, this guy really needs a running back. So you can extract value from that running back position, right? Who's going to overpay for their position? So target teams who need help at the premium position. So think about it. Super flex, a guy's rolling out 2 quarterbacks that are iffy. Hey, if I have a kind of like a Kirk Cousins type, like I do on that team, maybe I can get more based on this league value of this quarterback. That's kind of how you audit it, right? You just say, hey, this guy needs this. This is where I know. And then keep it by its name. Whatever their name is, this in the spreadsheet, this guy needs a quarterback. Who can I offer for this? Also, I think track trades in your leagues is the most important thing. Knowing what other managers look in for trades and tendencies matter. So, you should track every transaction, even if it's not accepted. So if they send you an offer, you don't like it, just know, okay, this guy likes this player. Note it in your spreadsheet. Hey, this is who I could go after. And then identify what positions they could overpay for, right? If you cross-reference them with other team needs and say, hey, I know this guy likes this youth. There's always that youth guy out there, right? The guy is always rebuilding, and the conceptually rebuilder hey, I know this guy likes this guy. I know he likes youth. I'm going to use that against him. Right. But track every trade to see what the tendencies are. And then you can start really just kind of highlighting, hey, this guy is a youth chaser, veteran chaser. This guy loves draft picks. This guy loves this. And you kind of mentally do that. But just having it in a spreadsheet to see kind of deals that have made or haven't been made, that's really important. Right. The other underutilized one is fab. So, when you look and see how guys do fab bids, every bid I throw in my spreadsheets for players, right? And you say, okay, this is who they've been trying to get. And I think the most important thing is who did they not get, right? Who got outbid and now they're scrambling. Now they're looking around and saying, man, I missed out on that bid. They don't have maybe a ton of money left on fab. This is when you start saying, okay, I can kind of take advantage of that and go use that feet to the fire a little bit, maybe get a little bit more increased value on my veteran running back or that wide receiver that's maybe on his last leg. And that's kind of track their fab, see how much they have, see who they've been targeting, and then use that against them as well. Then draft pick tendencies is huge. I think, especially when we're thinking of like, how do they use their draft picks? Do they just trade them? Some guys they're gone. They don't like their first. I'm good there. Or, are some guys like they want them, right? Hey, I'm hoarding them. That's where you can get some value too if you're going to retool, which we're going to talk about. But also keep track of who they pick. What are the profiles they pick? And there's a separate tab for that in the spreadsheet below. Hey, who are they picking? What profiles do they go after? Are they going after the Troy Franklin types? Are they going after the Bucky Irvings in the 3rd, 4th round? Maybe they don't value running backs as much, so that's going to be harder to negotiate with. But just track their picks, especially when you're in the rookie draft, so you can see, hey, if I like this player, but I know that the manager in front of me loves this profile, I got to get ahead of him. Right? These are the ways that kind of get a little bit of an advantage right now in Dynasty. Now, before we dive into the strategies, I just always show this because this is freaking fantastic. I loved it from EK Baller. He's a really good dude. He did this a few years ago, just kind of showing you the cycle of pick and player value. And I think it's good to go back to. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is in this format. But just if you're deciding, okay, where are we at, right? So we're in the middle of Dynasty season, kind of wrapping up there in October. Right now, when you're looking at it, this is the time to buy picks because they're cheap and people are going for it. They're going to go try to win. Then as you go through, you'll see like February, the hype season goes. That's when you sell your picks. And then really selling picks starts in like February all the way to May, like your rookie drafts. That's really kind of where you want to kind of sell picks depending on where you're at. But buying picks right now, that's what that mode we're in. But this is a fantastic chart. Go find them on X. You can see it, EK Baller. You can just use it. But this just shows you kind of how to the cycle that you see out there. Now, I do think there's nuances in every league, but it's a good strategy to use. Now, let's get into my 2 favorite rebuild strategies, okay? First one is what we call a retool. So this is just, and this is my go-to strategy because I don't know about you all. I like to win money, right? So if you're completely tearing down, you're throwing away your entry fees. I don't like throwing away my entry fees. I like looking at a retool where you try to basically 2-year intervals, you try to compete every season, right? So, and really, if you're in the middle of the pack, you feel like you're there, like that 4-3 team that I have. I'm like, I'm in the pack. I think I can do it. I'm going to either make for a push this year or next year, right? So I'm looking for the the 2-year windows, because there's too much uncertainty. I think the building out multiple year rebuilds, they're pretty much over at this point. I think it can be done, but with leagues folding, with all the other bad stuff that comes with the format, try to win now. And if you need to retool, you can. So first, I would say is obviously premium positions matter the most. Look at your league settings, understand them, and understand like, hey, I need to go grab these elite profiles and get these premium positions. But that doesn't mean just young players, right? So for example, last year, if you were implementing this strategy last year, I talked about, 2 years ago when I wrote the column and I kind of went into this stuff, look for those older guys that still have value, right? So, for example, if you look at the top of the running backs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, those are your top 3 running backs right now in PPR. Those guys, outside of Barkley, but Kamara and, I think I got Kamara for Tyjae Spears last year. I got Derrick Henry for a second last year. Those are the guys right now that maybe they'll help you this year, right? So you're looking like, okay, who can I look at? Who are some veterans out there that are struggling right now? But next year they can bounce back, right? So you can still do those premium positioning, especially if it's a point per first down, point per carry, those type of things. Look at your league settings, but go get those premium players at those positions. Even if they're older, you can still target those guys. Injuries and age, that always kind of goes into play, right? So like, hey, older guys there, maybe some guys come out. CMC, for example, is probably the cheapest you're going to have him. Possibly comes back at the end of this year to help you, and in next year, right? There's always risk involved with these, but I always try to go for like, hey, look at the Baker Mayfield types, the Geno Smith from a couple years ago. There are quarterbacks out there as well that you're like, hey, I can buy low on now. Then they have QB2 value. That's kind of what you look for. Then target profiles and projected roles, not a particular player. Okay. So avoid chasing past performances when you're retooling, right? When you're looking at that 2-year window, try to project what their future role could be and capitalize on their current market. Sometimes that's what's great about this is you see a projected role different than others, right? The most common example I use is everybody thinks T. Higgins is going to be a wide receiver 1 somewhere else. You can use that. You can go out there and target him. You can say that. But if everybody's doing it, go away from it, right? Like you can look and see, okay, what are some guys out there? Go through some rosters, go through their upcoming free agents. Who are some underrated players that you really like that think you're going to have a role? Now, luck is involved. If they get signed by a player that you really like, a team, and hey, they have a profile, then they have a role now. You hit it. You look like a genius, right? But just understanding, hey, they have this and they have this role that I think they can have. And then add elite talent. Don't trade away. The number one issue I see, the number one thing that I see out there that people make mistakes on, I need depth. No, you don't. Not in a rebuild, whether you're retooling, and add elite fantasy talent. Do not trade away a dollar asset for 15 nickels, right? Don't do that. Trading for depth is the fastest way to be a bottom feeder in your league. Okay. Capitalize on the hype of less talented players in your roster, add them in a package to tier up, right? It's okay to tier up. Grab some guys that the people really like, right? Look for dynasty assets that are elite top 24 players. You need as many top 24 players as you can in your roster. If that means consolidating your depth and moving back up into a tier ahead of them, do that, right? That's kind of how you look at that. Example from last year was like Jalen Waddle. For example, Jalen Waddle last year, that was everybody's love last year. Look at this year. Najee Harris is tearing up. He's a running back 1 right now, right? And Waddle's value's gone. Everybody expected Waddle to kind of be there. Waddle is a perfect example from last year. If you're doing this, boom, you got it. Move up into that tier. Move off of him, right? Go get those elite assets, especially at the running back position, right? So go out there, kind of grab those guys. A guy like Jalen Waddle comes to mind right now. Like I think with Tua coming back, he's kind of having a down year. Go see if you can kind of tier up with one of these wide receivers out there that's doing okay, but you're like, hey, I think I want to go get Waddle. I think he can get back up in that top 12. Olave, he's fallen down to like the wide receiver 20 range. Hey, I think he can come back. Those guys, go talent those guys on the retooling, because in next year, you're expecting like that top end production there. Now, what else you need to do? So consolidate players, right? As many top 24 assets as you can. I'm going to say that you can always fill your roster spots in later with veteran production, and they get cheap, right? If you're going to retool this year and you're not looking for, like, you're going to try to make the playoffs, but you're really pushing for next year, get as many elite players as you can, even if they're injured. Hey, you got them. And in the offseason, that's when you go bargain shopping, right? That's when you go get like a Derrick Henry for a second in the offseason, or you go look at Joe Mixon, right? These other players. That's when you target that production. Off season, hey, fill in gaps. That's what I'm doing. As of right now, your number one job is to collect as many assets as you can, and you're like Thanos with the stones. Get as many assets as you can, no matter fit. You're not filling a roster. No one cares about that right now. Just retool, get as many top 24 guys as you can. Then you start strategizing. Okay, where is that depth need to be later? But remember, depth is overrated at this rebuild strategy. You're just trying to get as many pieces as you can. And then move picks to younger assets is another one. So you should be willing, because it's a retool, it's not a rebuild, to move picks for younger assets as proven production, right? So look for players who, if they stay healthy, can give you a high production ceiling for at least 2 seasons. This will help lessen the blow of losing those picks. So if you're looking at it and you're like, hey, I'm going to give up this first, but I do think that they can help me this year. It's a late first, and then they can still perform well next year, because we see it. As much as we love the Brian Thomas Jr.'s and all these other guys, people miss on picks, right? Think of Sky Moore. Think of all these guys. I'd rather have elite production, or at least above average production for 2 seasons, than missing on a guy like that where I can still plug and play. I'm still trying to win, right? We wait on these rookies sometimes. Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, some of these other guys, they just haven't performed yet. Whereas if I would have traded them for at least a younger veteran, or like just a mid-tier veteran who gives me production for 2 years and I can compete, I'm okay with that if I'm building out my roster, right? That's kind of how I look at that. Now, that is the retool strategy, right? So, be flexible. I think with picks too, you have to know that like people are more intelligent when selling draft picks. They don't just sell them right away. So, look for, as a buyer, get more of a return too, right? So if I'm selling a pick, people know how valuable those picks are. You can get probably a little bit more now just based on how kind of managers hoard those picks and they want them. Now, we're talking about hoarding picks. There's another strategy. I don't hate this strategy, but I don't love doing it because it's risky, right? So the total teardown here, you can really build a dynasty with this. It really comes down to the league. You have to know your league. That's why you have to audit it, right? Because you need constant management of it, constant offers, and you need a lot of patience. So for a tear down strategy where you're kind of tearing down your full league and your team, you're saying, I got to get rid of this thing. I got to do this. Here's how you should do it. So you audit all your league mates. You should know all your league mates' tendencies inside and out. Then you set the market. When you think of it, markets and dynasty are all micro markets established by members of your league, right? So content creators, people on social media, buy, sell, you hear all these terms. That shit does not matter unless your league values that player the same way. And a lot of times it doesn't. They're microcosms of themselves, right? They're micro markets. So you know how you're going to have to establish value? You set the market, right? Just because, Tyreek Hill went for 2 firsts in some Twitter trade out there does not mean it's going for 2 firsts in your league, because the value might be different, but you got to set it, right? So if you decide to tear your team down, set the market high enough when negotiating your deals so that you can continue getting high value. If you set it too low, if you're in desperation, you're like, oh, I got to get Tyreek off my roster. Here's a first. Now, better players that maybe a little bit less better than Tyreek Hill, you're going to struggle, because where's the value now? Is it a first? Is it now just a second, right? So you have to set that market early. Set it early. Set it as high as possible as you can, and don't negotiate out of desperation, right? Now, after you understand what your market is and what that market is there, you can get rid of your veteran assets, right? Move top veteran assets first. Okay, set those high value. Like, don't be getting rid of Jaylen Warren for a third. That's not going to set a market, and that just sets bad precedence for your deal. Go out there and move your top veterans first, and always squeeze as many picks as you can out of your league mates, right? So if you move a top veteran and you get a first, add a fourth in, add a third. You're just trying to acquire as much draft capital as you possibly can, right? And again, when you're thinking of it, look for your guys on the veterans that have the most value down the stretch. Running backs are key, right? Like, this is where veteran teams or contending teams are going to look for some running backs right now. This is the time that you can start really kind of selling them and moving off of them. And once you sell one, other contenders are going to panic. That's the other thing to know. When you sell one asset off to somebody they're competing against, other contenders like, oh, I got to jump on this train. And then that's when really gets to get rolling, right? That's when the file sale really happens. And that's when they start bidding against each other. That's why you set the market first, so you can get them to start bidding against them. Now, diversify. So number one thing, too, future pick and players, diversify, right? Don't just put all your eggs in one draft class. diversify it, right? The 25 class is very solid at the running back position. A lot of depth there, right? Wide receivers are okay, top heavy though. I will tell you this, 26 class is, it's a rough one. I was going through my rankings and it's tough to kind of identify right now. We're still a year out, but it's tough. But then, hey, get to 25 and 26, but also don't forget about the 27 class, right? Go out there right now. 26 and 27 picks are the cheapest they're going to be. Get those thrown in. If this is a full rebuild, you're looking at about 2 to 3 years. That still sets you on that timeline, but don't just invest in the one draft class, because if you miss, that destroys your rebuild. Where's your capital? Where's your value going to be on that roster? That's bad, right? And that diversify players. Don't just dive into like the same type of players that you always invest in. Kind of diversify. Go out there and get some Rondale Robinson types, some other types out there that can earn PPR and have a role, and you're looking at it, right? But diversify your draft picks, right? Acquire as much capital as you can. Get third and fourth round picks draft in. Be aggressive too in rookie drafts. So the more picks you have, the more aggressive you can be. You can turn 2 fourths into a third, right? So if you're sitting there, you have 2 fourths, a guy's kind of wavering, doesn't know who to pick, move up into that third, consolidate, right? So just be as aggressive as you can, right? People are always going to say, can you find a Puka Nacua? Not always, but you can identify profiles early and team schemes, and you can have some diamonds in there. Like, hey, I like this guy, but now I have some capital to move up and go get them. And then, hey, don't forget about adding veterans, right? The biggest thing is here, it's not going to look in long-term outlook, but you can flip assets weekly. This is where that common thing, if you're going to tear down, you got to be really, really active on the trades. You should be making multiple trades, like just trying to flip as many players as you can. So be aggressive. Be aggressive on the waiver wire. You never know what a waiver wire can just turn into a third or even a fourth, right? Those things happen. So you should go into it knowing, hey, I'm going to rebuild this. I'm going to tear the hell down to this team, but I'm going to add as many people I can on the waiver wire, because you already consolidated some of that depth anyway, trying to get elite assets too. And you're like, hey, I'm just going to add some guys and flip them. Give me a third, give me a second, give me a fourth. And then when you have all that, that's acquiring capital. But remember, diversify among the draft classes. That's really, really important. But remember also, the principles that we had in the retooling principles still matter. Try to get as many top 24 assets as you can. Don't perpetual rebuild, even in a teardown. Okay, you have a goal. 3 years, I'm going to make the playoffs. Here's how I'm going to do it. And that's how you lay it out there. Now, some final thoughts on this, just overall, time and patience, timing in the market is super important. Understanding kind of when to go after trades, when to not go after trades, having patience too. Don't blow your load right there at the beginning. Like, oh, this is it. I got to set this market really low. Okay. Having patience with the rebuild, target elite assets, no matter how you do it. Top 24, go through and rank them. These are the top 24 guys that I want, right? We have the dynasty rankings here, but you can find them anywhere. Go to Keep Trade Cut, figure out, hey, he the guys I want to target. Here they go. Don't bet on hope, though. So that's kind of my number one thing. Oh, he's going to be great. That's the Trey Lance, right? The Trey Lance rule. We'll just say that. Oh, he's a top 10 asset in Superflex. Look where Trey Lance teams are sitting now, right? Okay, egg on their face. And I had a lot of Trey Lance too. And that's where you're at. You're betting on hope. Oh, he'll pan out, right? I think Anthony Richardson's trending that way. I love Richardson, but that's that hope that we worry about. If you're giving up significant capital for him, that's where you can really bottom out your teams, right? Don't overvalue depth. I think it's overrated in a rebuild, right? Having that depth is overrated. As you get into as a contender and you need to add pieces, sure, depth is great. As a rebuild, though, just collect assets, set that league market, be aggressive, right? Time and patience is important, but be aggressive. Know when to go out there and really start hammering deals and moving players and trying to find them. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I know it's a little bit of a different video than we usually do, but I love talking about Dynasty Rebuild. Drop in the comments if you have any trades, anything like that. Come get in our Discord. We're always talking ball in there as well. Appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys in the next video.